From JBS Studios in Greater New York, this is the JBS News Update with Teisha Bader.
I'm Teisha Bader with the JBS News Update for Wednesday, May the 12th, 2021. The rocket assault against Israel from Gaza continued last night and continues into today and tonight, with sadly more fatalities to report to you, including an IDF soldier killed this morning when Hamas terrorists fired an anti-tank guided missile at an Israeli jeep on the Gaza border, killing 21-year-old Staff Sergeant Omer Tabib and wounding his fellow soldiers who were securing an Israeli community near the Gaza border against potential infiltration by terrorists. And last night, just outside the city of Lod, a father and his teenage daughter were killed by a rocket that hit their vehicle. The mother of the family was seriously wounded. 52-year-old Khalil Awad and his 16-year-old daughter Nadine were members of the Arab community, Lod Mayor Yair Revivo said, stressing that Hamas missiles do not differentiate between Jews and Arabs. Lod is one of the mixed Arab-Jewish cities in Israel and is normally an example of peaceful coexistence, though as we have been reporting to you, some Arab residents have been incited by the current situation and are taking part in violent and destructive riots in the city. Last night, a state of emergency was declared in Lod after 3 synagogues, several shops, and dozens of cars were set on fire. Israel's President Reuven Rivlin responded to the unrest, likening the violence in Lod to a pogrom, saying that the disturbances were unforgivable and that the silence from Arab leadership was shameful. Condemnation was heard from an Arab-Israeli member of the Knesset. Meretz member Isawi Frej told Israel's Channel 12 about the need to condemn the violence. He said, "I expect all my colleagues," speaking of Joint List Knesset members Ahmad Tibi and Ayman Odeh, and local leaders, get up and say it clearly, unequivocally. He said, "I expect and urge all leaders in my community, and I mean school teachers and principals, cafe and pharmacy owners, and Knesset members. This is the time to speak out." Meanwhile, the unrelenting onslaught of rockets from Gaza continued today in central and southern Israel, where school has been canceled for the rest of the week. Ben Gurion International Airport also has temporarily stopped air traffic due to the ongoing barrages in the area. The IDF gave a total count earlier today of 1,050 rockets in the span of 38 hours. But since then, hundreds more have rained down on Israel, including in Ashkelon, and a direct hit on a home in Sderot that left several people injured, including a 6-year-old boy who is said to be critical. The IDF has been conducting airstrikes in Gaza in response to the onslaught, targeting and succeeding to take out a number of senior Hamas commanders, as well as what they call significant terror targets. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said he was sending Deputy Assistant Secretary of State Hadi Amar to go to the region immediately to meet with Israeli and Palestinian leaders. Blinken said Amar will bring to bear his decades of experience, and in particular, he will urge on my behalf and on behalf of President Biden a de-escalation of violence. Blinken once again condemned the rocket fire at Israel in, he said, the strongest possible terms, and defended Israel's right to defend itself, but also urged Israel to do its best to avoid civilian casualties. The IDF does its utmost to avoid any civilian casualties, with targeted airstrikes and warnings issued in advance, among other measures. Blinken said, "I think Israel has an extra burden in trying to do everything they possibly can to avoid civilian casualties, even as it is rightfully responding in defense of its people." Amar is expected to arrive in Israel sometime late tonight or tomorrow. Yesterday in New York City, thousands of pro-Palestinian and anti-Israel demonstrators protested against the Jewish state just outside the Israeli Consulate in New York and then marched up towards Times Square. There was a smaller group of pro-Israel demonstrators nearby with heavy police presence. We will have more for you on that tonight after this newscast as Shachar Azani speaks with Israeli Consul General in New York spokesperson Itai Milner on In the News. And Jewish organizations here in the U.S. continue to express their solidarity with Israel. The UJA Federation of New York held an online event this evening. Together, it wrote with the Jewish Community Relations Council of New York and with the Israeli Consulate, writing, "We are gathering virtually in solidarity to demonstrate our unbreakable bond with the people of Israel. We pray for an end to the violence and the restoration of peace and stability." Taking a look now at our programming for tonight on JBS for Wednesday, May the 12th at 7 o'clock. Susan J. Gordon, author of Because of Eva, traces her family's harrowing escape out of Nazi Europe to a sole Hungarian woman named Eva, eventually befriending her in her final years. At 8 o'clock, Robert Siegel explores the role of technology in 2021 with Nicholas Carr, Sherry Turkell, and Virginia Heffernan. At 9, Mark Golub sits down with Yossi Ron, whose parents were killed in the Arab massacre of Kfar Etzion on May the 13th of 1948. At 10, Benny Morris talks about Israel's War of Independence. And coming up next, as I mentioned, Shachar Azani will speak with the spokesperson for the Israeli Consulate in New York, Itai Milner, who shares an update about the anti-Israel protesters clashing with police and pro-Israel demonstrators in front of the Israeli Consulate yesterday. And that's the JBS News Update for Wednesday, May the 12th, 2021. I'm Teisha Bader. Stay healthy, stay well.